One that runs a little long or goes pretty quick. I don't know. We'll see. So we'll do the obligatory kind of hand raising activity here. Out of everyone in here, who really considers themselves a front-end developer? Dang. The rest of you all back-end developers.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Less than I thought. Less front-end than I thought. Well, okay, so of the back-end developers, show of hands who hates CSS. Like, they definitely exist. Like the mere thought of floating content and clear fixes and God forbid the table display. It's just terrible, right? So a while ago, I want to say a good solid few years ago, Flexbox started hitting the scenes. And when it came out, it was kind of a pipe dream, right? It was, man, this looks like it solves all of our, intricate layout woes. However, the browser support for it is incredibly poor. So, we've got clients that are on IE 6 and 7, and we can't even use things like rounded corners. So, using something like Flexbox is, like I said, a pipe dream. Show of hands of people who are familiar with Flexbox and using it even just a little bit. Good. I was hoping to not see very many. That's awesome. All right. Well, this should be fun. I'm excited about this. The way this is going to roll is I'll kind of just give an intro to it and then mainly focus on some demos. When you leave here and you want to find out more about Flexbox, you'll likely see some of the sites out there, most of the sites out there that explain Flexbox, really just kind of show you 10 boxes and just kind of how they flow in it. And at least for me, that just doesn't have a very solid connection in my head to be able to understand how it works. Once you understand more about it, it's a really good reference to look back because there are some intricate pieces. But I really wanted to kind of do more of a realistic layout. What does this look like when you use it in a menu, in your header, the footer, core layout of your site? So we are going to start off with the boring basics. So having said that,
the CSS3 Flexible Box, or Flexbox, is a layout mode providing for the arrangement of elements on a page such that the elements behave predictably when the page layout must accommodate different screen sizes and different display devices.
For many applications, the Flexible Box model provides an improvement over the block model in that it does not use floats, knowing the containers margins collapse with the margins of its content.
Did you catch that? All of it? Basically, the main idea is to give the parent element, or the container, the ability to change width and height of its children in order to fill blank spaces better, and also to prevent layout issues. I think most of us are familiar with layout issues using floats or traditional box model layout. This is kind of an elusive description, and so we will kind of do our best to uncover it all layer by layer. How do you start with it? What does it look like? It's as simple as this: display flex. And before we jump into more terminology, I just want to give you a decent understanding of what happens when you change something to display flex. Shall I reload again? One second. Sorry. So, show you the HTML first. Very simple. All of the HTML. Can you guys see it okay? Yeah? All right. All of the HTML in here is going to be simple. We're not really going to be focusing on the HTML side of things, so most everything you see in here is just going to be a set of divs, maybe an unordered list with some list items, and it's going to be really, really simple. So typically, when you have just a set of divs like this, everything's going to, by default, be a display block, and everything's just going to stack and be 100% width and just flow down like that. For each demo I go through, there will be some styling here, so I'll have some colors to make it a little bit more not only visually appealing, but also to better see separation of all of the items. So in this CSS, I've got nothing going on. So display flex, what it does, when I set it on there, is all of the children inside of that main container will now shift up to the smallest amount of space, that it can be, and it will lay out horizontally. And that's where I'm going to leave it, because I want to talk about the direction that these things flow. It's going to be one of the most important pieces as we move forward. So these are some of the 4 main concepts I really want to hit here. You've heard me mention container, you've heard me mention items, you just heard me mention direction, and then we'll talk about all of the properties involved with Flexbox. So the container is quite simple, and it is a term that you'll want to understand. The container is quite simply the item that has display flex set on it. All of its immediate children, then, are the items. And again, this is really important to understand these 2 concepts. Container is the one that has flex on it. Item is every immediate child under there. If I have something like a div inside of one of these LIs, it is not an item. And the reason to understand the 2 is the properties that get applied are either going to be pertinent to the container or the items. And we'll see this, don't worry. The other important thing here is direction and the axes. So we're all really familiar with the concept of an X and Y axis. We're probably all familiar with float left, float right, text align left, text align right, the concept of left and right. Don't think of X and Y. Don't think of Y runs this way, X runs this way. Reason being is Flexbox is direction agnostic. You can change the way that things flex inside of their containers. And so the terminology that you want to be familiar with is the main axis, which we'll see here in a second, and the cross axis. The main axis is when you set the direction of the flex, which we'll see here in a second, is either going to be row or column. Row is by default, and like you saw back over here, when I hit the display flex, all of its children go horizontal. That's because by default, the flex direction is set to row. If I were to change it to column, they would all stack. And yep, here we go. Sorry, this picture will do a heck of a lot better job of explaining it than I will. So flex direction row, like I said, is by default, everything goes left, right. When you change it to column, everything then goes vertical. Start talking about the properties now. This is where things start getting a little interesting here. Okay, so by default, sorry, I'll show you the HTML. By default, again, pretty similar setup here. So properties demo up here, which has display flex, we're going to get applied to in a second, and then everything inside of it. We'll start setting through them. First thing, display flex, what's going to happen when I turn this on? On?
The row across the top.
Absolutely right. Okay, let's start going down the list here. This, I've got, again, I don't know how well you can see it, I've got a height and background that I'm going to toggle on and off when we get to some of the more properties here. We're going to start with the direction here. So by default, if you guys look at these slides and code afterward on this property style sheet here, everything that I have listed first is the default value, just so you know when you're going through it. So you want to uncomment this, it's going to do nothing. Go down, change it to row reverse. I've not found an applicable use for this yet, but I know it's out there. This is such a new spec that we haven't, learned all of the cool little tricks we can do with everything. Putting it in row reverse, well, do exactly what you think here.
I think Arabic languages or other right to left reading languages, that would be an example.
Yes, that would be an applicable way of doing it.
What about tab order?
What's that?
With tab order, when you want to have one on the opposite side as row reverse, also change the tab order?
Yeah, and so will some of these other pieces. We'll change the tab order, and so you gotta be a little bit careful with it. And also, it gives you the ability to be. There could be malicious. I don't want to say malicious necessarily. You got to be wise about it. Be smart. Be safe about it, because you could be shifting stuff up now that relevance. You can start. Just be careful with it. From what I've seen, people just say be responsible with how you order things, and we'll get into ordering and see what the great uses are for it. As far as flex direction though, I've never used reverse. You'll see more direction stuff later, and I just haven't used these. Column will put us back to our usual way things lay out. And then again, a reverse order of how things lay out. We'll just reverse everything. Notice everything crammed together, and that's it. What happens when I want these all to actually take up space, or even, better, I want them to start wrapping down a line. By default, the way Flexbox works is always concerned with a single row. Turning on Flex Wrap here is not going to do anything, because all of my items know this is how small they are, that's how small they're going to be, until you change these. So let's go down here, we'll just say, all these divs in here, I want them to be 25% width. Oh, sorry, that's no wrap, that's what you do by default. Flex wrap though. Now this will actually make them 25% width and let them wrap. If it doesn't know, if it thinks it can't wrap, what it's going to do is give it the most space that it knows it can take with being on a single line. So again, I turn wrap off. Even though I've got a width of 25% on every single one of those divs, it's not doing that because it knows that it cannot go down another line. And some of this gets a little confusing. And trust me, it takes a little bit of playing with it to totally get it. Wrap reverse, this is just another one of those weird things that I can't see the light at the end of the tunnel of why you would do this. I know it's there, I just don't really get it yet. So wrap reverse will do everything in the reverse order and leave you with just some weird gaps. Whatever. I'll turn it off. Okay, now we get a little weird here. I'm not going to go into in-depth detail about all these properties because it gets a little weird and you've got to go through a lot of different examples before you can truly grasp them. So I just kind of want to show you an example of what they do and kind of read you here the concept. So justified content is another property you would apply to your Flex container. And this defines the alignment along the main axis. And it distributes the extra free space left over when either all the Flex items on a line are inflexible or flexible but have reached their maximum size. It also exerts some control over the alignment of items when they overflow the line. It's so heavily worded. Let's just delete this. Let's remove the width that I had set down here, so we'll just default width here. By default, the content is justified to the start. And if you'll remember, I said there's no concept of left, right in here. It's all start, end. And this will make sense here in a little bit, but just remember that we can change the direction. And every single property you've seen me talk about here is applicable to that direction and will behave differently depending on which direction your container is set to go. So before we see it here, I'll just give you the example. Flex end here. Instead of saying basically float right or align right, we're saying flex end. And the reason I keep stressing this is because if I were to change this direction, which we'll see in a second, to column, and it had a height on there, flex end now becomes the bottom, not the right. Whereas flex start is either going to be left or top. So that's why we don't really use things like left, right. It just doesn't make any sense. Center here, since we're going in row direction here, it's going straight up, move everything to the center. This gets really cool. Justify content space between. What that's going to do is figure out how much space it has between everything and align it all properly. Space around is slightly different. We'll look at the difference between the two of these. This is a little weird because I've got some paddings around the main container.
Okay.
But what space between does is it'll take your, sorry, why? There we go. There we go. Space between will take your first item and shove it all the way to the start, and your last item and shove it all the way to the end, and then distribute the space evenly between all of those. What space around will do is almost the same thing, but it won't shove it way to the end. It'll just make everything equal amount of space around each other. And again, this would be the same whether I'm going in a row or a column. Align items. This defines the default behavior for how flex items are laid out along the cross axis on the current line. Those are two important pieces of information. and it is admittedly confusing. So instead of going on our main axis that we were doing here, where everything's going left, right, because we're in a row direction, this will align things going up and down on the cross axis, the only other axis there is. So think of it as justified content version for the cross axis, perpendicular to the main axis. So by default here is stretch. So I can take this off, and basically we're back to what we were in the beginning here. Stretch is the default. Any guesses why setting something like align items flex end, keeping in mind that we're going up and down now because it's the cross axis? Any guesses as to why this isn't doing anything?
No fixed height.
Exactly right. No, this is the height of it. It has nowhere else to go. So this is where we'll start toggling some of this. Just set a height of 300 pixels and a background color so we can see what's going on here. Setting flex in now pushes everything down to the bottom. And I know this is weird just seeing examples of blocks. What the heck would you actually use this for? We'll see those later, but I just kind of want to keep going through this. So center, what does that do on our cross axis?
Vertically, middle.
Exactly right. Awesome. You guys got this. Baseline, as a developer knowing squat about design, things like baseline and any of that other typography stuff, it's all lost on me. And so when I saw this, I knew that our designers at work would be particularly thrilled, right? Because it's always, align it to the baseline. What the hell does that even mean? I don't get it. Okay, so align baseline. Well, we're not really doing anything here, right? Because we've got the same height on everything. But somewhere down here I got it. Maybe not. Down. Whatever. We'll just go in here and do it. I think this is pretty soon.
Move your div down outside the parent.
There we go. Let's do something a little bit more drastic. So imagine, I mean, when you have real content, this is hardly a proper example. When you have real content in there, this will align everything to that baseline. I mean, amazing for designers, right? I knew we're going to get stoked about it. Right, Brad?
That's true.
So that's just a quick example of that. That's the baseline. Ah, dang it, there it happens right there. Ah, there we go. Yep. Okay. Oh yeah, so the default, which we didn't see, the default is align item stretch. We didn't see that because I hadn't set the height yet. Now that we actually have height to go in, it will stretch and make the whole height that. And align content. This is where stuff starts getting a little bit more confusing, and I don't know that we're going to actually I don't know that I can drive this point home tonight, but I'll give it to you. This aligns flex containers lines, keep in mind that's plural, within where there is extra space in the cross axis, similar to how justified content aligns individual items within the main axis. So what the heck does that mean? Let's see if I can remember this one here. We'll just say flex end. Oh, yeah. Sorry, I highlighted the plural here, so it's lines. This will not work unless you have multiple lines in here. And this is one that I just haven't messed around with. Everything else works for me. I've not had a need to use this yet, but I know it's there. I just don't know it yet. So we come down here and again set our width to 25 and set our wrap. Set it to wrap. We'll start to see how this works now. Because we had one line, it wasn't doing anything. This property is only concerned when there's multiple lines. Of course, flex start, center, and of course, baseline, which again, we don't have any different heights. So align content is one of those ones that I don't quite get yet. It's all right. Everything we've seen since we've been looking at these purple boxes all involves properties applied to the container, the flex container. So now I want to take a look at flex items. And the first one is order. So this is a really interesting property that can be applied just by itself, and you'll get advantages out of it. You don't have to necessarily be using all the whiz bang with Flexbox to get some interesting uses here. One of the ones off the top of my head would be when you're on a desktop layout, and let's just think of like your typical blog post. You might have like a featured image on the left and your content on the right over here, or vice versa. Yeah, your content on the left, image on the right. And when you get down to a mobile size, you don't necessarily want that text being the first thing you see, because you want that visual representation about what the heck's going on. And depending on how you structure your HTML, if you did it properly and semantically, doing this now is weird. You either have to do some weird tricks with floating, or you're floating the opposite direction of what your HTML is set in. Or this could be way more drastic. You could have something way down here that makes sense on desktop that now you're on a mobile and you want it way at the top. And Order allows you to do that. Fantastic. So let's take a look. So the fourth item, I've set its order to -1. So it was in the fourth position. I shifted it all the way to -1, which is going to bump it before anything, unless anything at a smaller number. By default, they all have an order of 0. So let's take a look now at our nth child of 1, which is actually now visually our second item. And we'll shift that down to order 7, and we'll keep doing this. Move the second one and the third one, and we can shift these things around wherever. And again, it doesn't have to be like in this grid fashion. We could just be totally, block level and shift things way up to the top of the page. So you could have something with really irrelevant content at the bottom, and kind of, if you've got ulterior motives, you can shift that to the top now where it was really low in priority, and then jump to the top for whatever reason. Yeah. The last
Browser
thing-
support is on that?
Yeah, so I was going to cover browser support at the end. Maybe it made more sense to cover it up front. I wanted to get you excited before I kind of drop a bomb about browser support. But I guess we can talk about it now. So browser support for Flexbox is widely accepted as IE 11 and above. Almost every other browser supports this. The Can I Use page has like green everywhere, except for IE 6, 7, 8, 9. Now, 10 has pretty good support. It's missing one crucial piece, and that is a Flex Wrap. So you can still do quite a bit without using Flex Wrap. So if you don't need to rely on that, you can use it in IE 10. Also keep in mind that Flexbox, or as the W3C will call it, as the flexible box model, has undergone a lot of change over the past few years. And so IE 10, I think, supports the old model of it. So if you're using a preprocessor, like I use Bourbon, it's got awesome Flexbox support in there. It will spit out all of the old stuff for you automatically. Right now what you're seeing is all just the standard, no vendor prefixing any of that in here, which of course works fine in Chrome, but other browsers break down a little bit. So if you're concerned about it, make sure you're using something like Prefixer or some sort of preprocessor that will do this for you automatically. Thanks for bringing that up. I was saving it for the end. All right, so yeah, let's take a look at these guys now. This gets pretty fun. Here we had a specific width set on all of our children. Not always a desirable thing when you're working with this. Sometimes you want it to, not work in traditional ways. You want the browser to kind of do its thing and let these move around. We'll turn all this off. Kind of get back to default here. Okay, instead of setting a width to any of these, a flex item has a flex grow property. And let's take a look at what the heck this means. If I set flex grow to 1, what that means is that all of the space, all the white space you saw here, on the right there, it will take all of that white space, calculate how many items you have, and apply that white space to the width of your items. Again, we're concerned with that one row. By default, that's how this thing always operates. Get all the way across the screen. The flex grow number that you get is unitless, so you wouldn't give a pixel here or anything like that. When I say flex 1, I'm saying take all of that white space and apply equally one piece of that to every single item in there. And so by default, what you see is everything gets the same width. Well, what would happen then if I put flex grow 3 on one of these guys? It will grow 3 times as much as the rest of them did. Does that make sense? It's a weird thing to see at first. So if I just keep bumping this up, and I'm like, hey, grow 10 times as much as the rest of those, you can do it. You can start to see here, one item that I wanted to cover in layout stuff, which I'm running a bit long, so I'm going to start speeding up, is the Holy Grail layout. I think most of us are familiar with this. It's the concept of a header. You've got maybe 2 sidebars on the left and right, and you got your main content area in there, and then you got a footer. That layout, I mean, we all might think it's easy now, but when you're first dealing with that stuff and we actually look at what we're doing, it's crap. We're doing crap layouts to get this. We're using floats in ways they were never intended to be used. And we've done good. We've done really good with it. But this just makes so much more sense. So you can very easily set here, you're not dealing with percentages, you're dealing with unitless points here. So you can see quite easily, like, let's just pretend that 4 now is our main content area. The rest of them are sidebars. It becomes very easy to do. So that's flex grow. Let's see if I can pull off flex shrink. Flex shrink is a weird one, and I don't want to waste too much time getting hung up on this. So let's just try this here. I got 2 guys. Here we go. Bear with me here. I've set flex 500 pixels on our nth child of 5 here, and I haven't been covering the shorthand here. Instead of flex grow and flex shrink, flex will allow me to set grow, shrink, and then one you haven't heard about yet, which is basis. So it's always, it goes in that order, grow, shrink, basis. Now what basis is, again, I'll try to do my best to explain this, is the size you would love your item to be. If it can't be that size because of your viewport size, it will then rely on shrink and grow values to figure out how to size this thing. So what we're saying here is 500 pixels is our ideal. What are we doing with it when it's not 500 pixels? So as you can see here, 6, which has a flex of 2 to 500 pixels, is smaller than 5. It wants to deal with that. Essentially what's going on here is flex grow of 2 in combination with the basis is saying when you're above 1,000 pixels, I want you to grow twice as large. However, when you're under that, I want you to be twice as small. It's weird. So let's see if we can get this here. Sorry, going wider. It's hard to tell because we got a bit of space here, but you can see 689 and 878. So it's trying to grow that more because it's above 1,000 pixels now. That is a weird one. Like I said, I don't want to dwell on this too much, but anyways, moving on. Align self. This is the last property, and then we'll get into actual demos. Sorry, this is taking so long. Align self is very similar. It's got the same flex in, flex start, baseline, center. However, where we normally apply that on the container, now we can put that on an item itself. So let's say we want our container to align everything, flex start, but we have like 2 things that we want to shift down or put in the middle for, you know, God knows what reason. So we'll do this number, set align items to flex start, and we'll come back down here to our item now. And we'll just say we want that 5th one to shoot to the bottom, right? And we want the 8th one to align center. You can find some textures now. You get the idea. So this gives you that fine-grained control over the individual item as to the group as a whole, as opposed to the group as a whole. Woo! Before we move on to demos, any questions? I know that's, I knew we were going to go through this and not totally have it sink in, but any top-level questions about the properties?
I was going to ask if you could have items that were containers for other items.
Absolutely. Yes. So, well, yes. Everything, we've been dealing with one level here. Each one of these items can also be a display of flex. So inside of here, I know, again, we're dealing with blocks here, so it's impossible to imagine, but one of these blocks could also display flex. And then all of its immediate descendants inside of there will be items. So yes, it can be an item and display flex, so it will be a container in a container, and it will not get any of the child then attributes because it acts as a container then at that point. Great question.
When you did flex grow one,
Yep.
you each took up one section. If you put 3, would have that dropped it to 3 rows?
No. So let's go take a look. I don't think so. Let's take a look. 3, I think, will still apply the same amount all the way across that one. So let's just check it out. Let's grow. So here they're all 1. Change it to 3. They're all the same. Because what it's doing is, like I said, it's unitless. So don't get hung up so much on the fact that it's 3 and not 1. If I were to come down to here and set flex grow 10, it's still going to apply that much more to it. Does that make sense?
What if you turned on wrap?
Let's do it. It's unitless. So it could be 100, and it would just apply basically a fraction of 100 to every single one of those
So
items.
what are your other options other than 1?
To set a width. So here we're setting,
No, I mean, instead of 1 on the flex grow property, you can put anything else.
no, you can put whole numbers. Is all. And I think maybe what you're getting at here is how do I make them wider? Is that?
What if you put like decimal, 0.5?
Yeah. It'll either bear or do nothing. I think it's just whole numbers.
Or what, like just 0.5?
0.5. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any number there.
Yeah.
I think on comment line 104, talk about 104 again.
Yep. So let's start here first.
Well, for the items.
Yeah. So don't get hung up so much on the width as much as you should be concentrating on the idea of white space. So here's the default. We've got all that white black space now on the right. When we set grow, what we're doing is taking that white space and applying it to the width of everything else. So we're saying, use up this space. You have it, use it. And I know the idea that being unitless is weird, right? It could be whatever. It's really just saying, I want you to take equal amounts or I want you to be larger, right? So again, when we set 1 here or 10, we're saying distribute everything evenly. But if I have one of them that I actually want to be bigger, I tell it be twice that amount you applied to everything else or whatever, right? I could set 11 and you really wouldn't notice much of anything here. Generally, just to tell you, what I almost always do, I've never really done this. What I've always done is just set flex 1, almost always, because what I want to happen is for everything to just grow that entire row. So I can see where, like, what would you use this for? I have a lot of questions about a lot of these properties in here because I just can't fathom where I would do it yet, but I know it's coming. So.
Where does it put the remainder if there is not enough, like if you have 91 pixels of white space and you have 9?
One of them will be just a little bit bigger. I mean, like it will do its best.
But
No
does it
eye
put
is
it on
going
the
to catch
first
that.
one, or does it put it on the first one? Or?
I have no idea.
So, well, what it's sounding like to me is the numbers are meaningful in relation to each other.
Yep. Bingo. That's absolutely right.
Kind of like Z-index, for
Yep.
example.
Yeah, exactly right.
So if you wanted to make the individual one smaller, that's where you would want the flex grow to be more than 1.
Say that again.
If you wanted the individual item to be smaller, that's where you would use the flex grow of 1 on. So if you had like a flex grow of 10 and then you made the flex grow of 5 of the individual item.
Too much. Let's try
Or
it.
use flex shrink.
Yeah, and shrink admittedly is weird. So I'm curious, I've never actually tried this. So if I set both of them, all of them to 10 and set this guy to 5. Yeah.
So that's where flex shrink is the inverse, right? So
Right.
if you do-
Yeah, and flex shrink gets even weirder when you start combining the idea of the basis with it. Because flex shrink is one of those ones that I feel like I tell this to shrink, okay, I don't always see it shrink. It's only when you start using it with basis that it really starts to shrink up. And it's a weird one.
Why is it not 25% smaller now? Or is it not counting
The
that?
padding on the, yeah, it's for white
Yeah.
space, the extra space.
I got you.
Right. It's fun. We're moving to actual demos now, other than just boxes. All right. Put that over here, make sure I don't miss anything. I meant to kind of go over these before I moved in there. Here calls out the shorthand of the thing. So flex direction and flex wrap can be summed up, instead of putting both of those explicitly, you can say flex, flow, row, no wrap, instead of actually saying the two of them. We're familiar with this concept. Justify content, align items, and align content. These are all for the container. And then item properties are order, and then grow, shrink, basis, and then align self, which will allow you to shift it independent of what the container's aligning is. Woo! All right, demos. I picked some things that I feel like are easy enough to consume because they're just so common. I mean, we as web developers always deal with this stuff. So this is a pretty simple one, and I'm going to test this out. I don't know how well it's going to go. I might kill this idea off after the first one or two. But anybody who is familiar with trying to have just a horizontal navigation and trying to get equal space in there, throw out some